Hey guys, Wade Thomas, Black Tie Barn Candle Company. Today we're going to be doing a video of making a few wood wick candles. Now this has been a video I've been asked to put out for several weeks now. I've put out several videos on regular cotton wick type candles as well as some melts recently, but I haven't really had the need to make any more wood wicks yet. I had made a lot but had not really done any footage of it, and so I'm pretty stocked up good for fall and winter. So with that being said, I don't really have a need for many wood wick candles at the moment, particularly in my white vessels that are common for Christmas, but I have had some recent orders for some more of my wood wick candles that I have in my black vessels. And so I do need to do a little bit of stocking on a couple of them for an order that just came in today actually. So I thought, well, if I'm going to make a few more, let's go ahead and record this one. And that way you can all see a little bit of making a wood wick candle. Now there are several ways to do this. It's all going to depend on the type of wax you're using, of course, the type of jar you're using, your batch size, and several other variations as well. Just keep that in mind when we're making this. Again, just to kind of keep consistent with the other videos I put out the last couple weeks, I'm not doing this in a formal workshop or candle workshop or a dedicated workspace for that matter. Today, we're going to do what I have been doing and showing you how you can do this just from your own kitchen or any other suitable place that you might have in your home. And so we're going to just do a little bit of a setup, some preparation in the kitchen area, get your warmers ready, your double boiler ready, whichever method you're using, get the materials you will need to make your candles. I hope you enjoy this video. If you are a current subscriber, thanks for being here as always. I appreciate you. You all know that. If you're new here, welcome. There are going to be a lot of other videos related to candle making, melt making, and candle related business. So if you are interested in any of that, I would encourage you to subscribe. And once again, thanks for being here. Give this video a like. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to be doing two different wood wick candles today, both in the black vessels, and I'll talk a little bit about each as we're making it, but I'm going to do it in two different ways. I'm not going to use a Presto pot with a spout, nor am I going to use a wax melting tank, only because the majority of people especially starting out, don't have those materials. However, I'm going to use a standard Presto pot that doesn't have a spout, just to show you how you can still use that to kind of make your process a little bit more efficient when you're melting wax and going batch to batch. The other way I'm going to be doing it is with a double boil method. Now you've seen this the last couple of videos I put out. It's the most common way for new candle makers to start making candles and melts. And so of course I'm going to do it that way today as well, because again, from your kitchen without a dedicated workspace, it works perfect. There's no need for all the fancy equipment, especially when you're starting out. Now, as you grow, you may find that certain investments might help your productivity overall and your efficiency overall. But for now, just stick with the basics. You can create amazing candles just right here in the kitchen. The first thing we're going to do, if you're not familiar with the double boil method, is you're just going to fill up that pot. Now, most people use a smaller pot than this. I like this canning size pot because you can fit several of these around it, like 3 or 4 fairly comfortably. And so if you're going to make several batches of candles, it's good to keep, a couple pouring pots full of wax melting while you're making another batch. So it's just another way to be more efficient. And even though I'm only going to use one of these today in this video, I just typically use this pot all the time if I'm going to do the double boil method. Now, so what is that method? If you're not familiar with it, you just fill it up with water, maybe the bottom third, definitely no more than half, but really just the bottom third. You don't want this floating. You want it to be able to rest the handle on the outside, so you don't want too much water in it, just enough to cover the bottom portion of the container. Just with water, you heat it up to a boil, and while your wax is in the pot, it's going to sit on top of that boiling water, and that will safely melt your wax. Keep an eye on your temperature. When it's ready, take it off and get to making candles. Now that we've covered what the double boil method is, that's what we're going to do real quick. And so I've got my pitcher on the scale. I'm going to tare my scale to 0. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. You can turn the scale on, then put your pitcher on, and then hit tare, and that will balance it out to 0. Or you can just turn it on with the pitcher already on that, and so it's already deducting the weight of the pitcher. Now, I talk about how I track my recipes and manufacturers in several other videos, so I'm not going to talk about that today. But the 2 recipes that I'm working on today, one is called Bonfire Nights, and the other one is called Crackling Birch. With the Bonfire Nights, we're going to be using 6006 wax. With Crackling Birch, we're going to be using 3022 Clarus wax. I'll talk about these more as we get to that one. But I need to weigh out the 6006 wax for the Bonfire candles. And so according to my recipe, so for this particular candle, my normal batch size is 6 of them. However, I'm doing a half batch today. I'm just gonna make 3 of them. I really only need 1 right now, but I'm gonna make a couple others. I hate making just 1 or 2 candles. So we're gonna make 3 of those, which is a half a batch. And so this product that I use, the software I use, will take my manufacturer, my recipe, cut it in half for me, tell me exactly what I need. So I need 24.5 ounces of 6006 wax. So we're going to load that into this pitcher. We have several ways to do this. One way is however you're keeping your wax. I keep mine pre-cut into little cubes. So that way it's easier. I don't have to cut it every time. So when I get a new bag or case in, I just go ahead and cut it and store it in a container. And again, now I'm just going to start adding my cut up wax until I get to 24.5 ounces. And so I'm just a tad over, so I just need to take a little bit out. And there we go. So now that I've got the wax weighed out, now we set this in the double boiler. And that's it. Keep an eye on your double boiler. You're going to check the temperature every once in a while, just a heat gun or whatever method you have. But we'll keep an eye on that. To mention to you really quick, the other thing I'm doing, and I'll show it to you when we get to it, is in that Presto pot, I already have the other wax, which is Clarus 3022 wax. It is a 70% soy, 30% paraffin in that container over there. You might be asking, why am I using different waxes? Well, I use several different waxes for several different reasons. Some of them are based on what the customer has asked and their longtime customers, wholesale accounts, things like that, private label accounts. But the other reason is I often will try to improve my candle products just like everyone else. And so I might be using a certain wax for several years, and then maybe something else comes out that I want to try. And if I decide I like it better, I will slowly start transitioning my candle products to that new wax, which also just happens to work out nicely because for training and teaching and video purposes, it's really nice to use several different waxes to educate other people on how to use each wax a little bit differently. But I did just want to point out that it is sitting aside in a Presto pot warming up as we speak. When it's ready, I'll show you how to get, without a spout on the Presto pot, how to get that wax from that into your pouring pitcher. There are several ways to do it. You can pour it, you can use a cup. We're just going to use a measuring cup or a plastic cup just to transfer it. Keep it pretty simple. Keep it using products and tools that most of you might have already around the house. All right, guys, the 6006 is still melting here in the double boil, but the 3022 is getting close to being ready to go. So while it's getting close, I'm going to go ahead and wick these jars up and show you how I would wick my wood wick candles. So here are the jars that we're going to be using today. They are just black tumblers, and the wicks that we're going to be using are from the Wooden Wick Company. And the particular wick size we're using and type is called the original wick. It's 0.040 size and a 5/8 inch width. With wood wicks, you can get different thicknesses and different widths, and of course they have also several different types of wood wicks. I use almost exclusively the original wicks. I just like the consistency of them, and I don't really like the double plain ones of the dual wicks or the booster wicks. Now I know some waxes really prefer those wicks than these, but in everything I use, the original wicks work great. And again, this is 0.040 5/8 inch. Now that is for this particular wax, 6006, and with this particular fragrance oil, which is Crackling Birch. So we're going to need 4 of these. I'm making 4 of these candles. A little trick, if you use a lot of wood wicks, is make yourself a little template, basically. So find the right size of the wick that you need. By the way, I pre-cut and pre-wick all my wood wicks before I pour. A lot of people I know do just wick up their full wick and then they will trim it later. I don't like to do that. It's a little harder to trim wood wicks after the fact, so I prefer to pre-cut them, and the trick I'm going to show you will help you do that. You can go back and touch up and trim it a little bit further if you want, but it is a lot easier to pre-cut your wood wicks, in my opinion. The trick is, once you have found your perfect wick size, trim that wick down and then label it. This is a 9 ounce. So for example, I labeled this one 9 ounce tumblers, and it is cut to the size that I know works great for this jar. So then all you have to do is use it as your little cutting guide, your little template. Of course, I forgot my scissors. Now, there are several things you can use to cut wood wicks. Really, scissors are not the greatest way to trim them after the fact at all, but this is one of the benefits of doing it this way, is scissors work just fine. So you can see, I just trim it off. Now you can get wood wicks pre-cut to the size you want for your jar, but I use wood wicks in several different size jars, so I went with the largest size and then I cut down to what I need on smaller jars. So again, I'm just going to cut up 4 of those using my little template here. All right, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep everything in the camera view to make sure you can see what I'm doing, but if I look a little awkward and clumsy, forgive me, I'm just trying to work around this camera gear. All right, so here are my 4 pre-cut wick sizes for the 4 jars that I need. Then you're going to need your wick clips made specifically for wooden wicks. So I need 4 of those. So the first thing I will do is go ahead and insert each wood wick into the wick clip. Try to make sure they're centered. And then I'm going to stick each one of them to a wick sticker. Now again, you don't have to use wick stickers. You can use some kind of silicone like an RTV silicone. You can use high temp heat guns if you like a hot glue. Personally, I would recommend you sticking with a silicone like the RTV, red RTV, some kind of gasket sealer, or wick stickers. I'm not a big fan of the hot glue gun, and I find that the wicks do come loose a little bit, even on the high temp ones. But if you're going to go with hot glue, go with high temp. I know a lot of people also struggle sometimes with the wick stickers. I would just say buy them from a reputed candle company. I have never had an issue with wick stickers. Partially though is because I make sure that they're also really nice and firmly stuck to the wicks. I also make sure my jars are clean. And then finally, if you want to preheat your jars, or if you do preheat your jars, or have a heat gun around, if you heat the bottom of your jar, it will make the wick sticker stick a little bit better to it because it makes it a little tacky. And so get these wick stickers on, just like that. Set that aside. And then the next step is to go ahead and place your wick. Now, again, these are pre-cut, so they should be perfectly the size we need. And so all you do is, of course, just take off the sticker cover and then add it to the snare. Now, don't press down firmly until you feel like you do have your wick right where you want it. And then what you do, just give it a nice extra push to get it right where you need it. Now, the cool thing about the wick clip assemblies is you have a little bit of flexibility. So if your wick is not exactly straight, you can slide it a little bit in your clip. You don't want to slide it too far. You need to keep it nice and firm in between. But you can align it a little bit if you're off just a smidge. The more you do this, the better you will get at finding the center. You've seen in some other videos, I use a wick attaching tool to make sure your cotton wicks are centered, dead center. But I don't have one of those that's made for wooden wicks. So unfortunately, you just got to do these by hand. But as you can see, that looks pretty good. And so set that aside and move on to the next one. Same process. All right, so the first 4 are wicked up. And I think you guys have seen me use these before as well, but I like to pour into these cooking aluminum pans, or aluminum foil pans. A couple reasons for that: it cuts down on messes. They're easy to wipe up and clean off. They're also cheap. That way you're not making a mess on countertops or anything like that. The other reason is these are aluminum foil, so it helps keep heat in a little bit more, and it will slow down the cooling process just a touch. Not necessary for that reason. I just like to do it regardless because of keeping things clean. So just put those there like that. We're going to set that aside until it's ready to pour. So speaking of being ready to pour, I think our wax is about ready. Let's go see where we're at. All right, guys, so just teared out the scale again. We're ready to add the wax to the melting pot. Now it's right about 195, which is about a pretty good spot to go ahead and start the mixing process. So I mentioned a little way to do this. If you don't have a pouring spout on your Presto melter, just use it, a cup or measuring device, another small pouring pitcher, whatever you have. And looks like for this, I'm going to need 33 ounces of wax. Now this is not the most efficient way to transfer the wax. I just wanted to show you, push come to shove, you're low on tools, this will get the job done. I'm just going to set this aside. Now again, if you have one of these with a pouring spout, you can find them all over on the online in groups. People can tell you where to get them. Amazon sells them. They're a great investment. That will really help this process. But if you don't have that, just showing one way you could transfer the wax to the pitcher. The benefit of using the Presto pot, if you're going to make several batches, that wax continues to melt for you and it's always ready, always melted and ready to go. However, if you do struggle with that, this double boil method works perfect, because you can just add exactly what you need to the pouring pot and then let that melt in the pot so it's ready to go. Right, so I've got my wax here ready to go. I'm normally working a little faster than this. I'm usually around 185 right now, but first thing you're going to do is add UV inhibitor. And I'll explain this here in just a sec, but I'm going to need 1 teaspoon of this. This is half teaspoons. So I'm adding 4 of these, or sorry, these are quarter teaspoons. So I'm adding 4 of those. Get that stirred in. I'm going to set that aside and get my oil measured out real quick. Make sure you tare your new container to 0. And I need 3.15 ounces. And I knew I didn't have enough in this bottle, so I brought another bottle with me. Just need a little bit more. 3.15. Just going to pour that in. Pour slowly, mostly so you avoid splashes. Set that aside. Now, I'm not using any dye. You've seen in a lot of my other videos. Most of my candles are colored. I find they sell better. Customers really like it, especially around holidays. But in these black jars, this looks a lot better with just natural colored wax. So I do not dye any of these, and it is a lot easier not having to mess with dye, let me tell you. So keep an eye on the temperature. When this gets to about around 170, which is right where it's at now, I'm going to go ahead and pour these for just a few more seconds here. And that's it. Because there's no dye, I add the UV inhibitor and the oil, and that's all I have to do to stir it and pour. Now you might be wondering, why did I add UV inhibitor if I did not use color? After all, the main point of using an UV inhibitor is to prevent the colors from fading on candles. Well, it can also help the natural color of the wax from fading a little bit on you. Now, it is really meant for candle color, but I use it in all my products, mostly more than anything, is for consistency. I add UV inhibitor to all my wax products, colored or not colored, for consistency. All right, let's go ahead and pour this. Move this over here so you can get a better shot. Now, when I'm doing wood wicks, I mentioned this before, they're pre-cut. Well, wax shrinks, and I know how much each of my different types of wax shrinks. So I'm going to pour this right to the very top of the wood wicks. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Now again, if you know how much your wax shrinks, I find that almost all wax shrinks a little bit, so I like to pour right to the top of the wood wick. It shrinks about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, and that's perfect. Then you don't need to trim them again. Looks like in these particular ones, I'll need to trim them just a tad more after the cool, but that's completely fine. They're easy to trim once they're cut most of the way. Anyway, these are ready to go, so they're poured. Let me go ahead and clean this pot out real quick. A lot easier to clean these out when it's still hot. So I just take another one of these and cover the top. I do that for a couple reasons. The biggest one is to keep any debris or dust from settling into the candle while they're cooling. Plus, again, encapsulating everything in some kind of insulated environment will help slow down the cure a little bit. It's really not necessary, but with certain waxes, for any of you who struggle with jar adhesion, too many sinkholes and things like that, try this method, see if it helps you out. All right, so I'm gonna do a little bit of cleanup real quick while we're waiting for the rest of this other wax to melt. Let's check it real quick. All right, guys, so it's almost time for the next candles, the Bonfire candles, to be made. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the jars wicked up just like we did last time. So we get my 3 jars over here ready to go. Now, remember, this candle uses 6006 wax. It's a little less soy. It's actually the reverse of 3022. It is 70% paraffin, 30% soy, and it needs a slightly smaller wick because it is not quite as viscous as the other wax that I used. This wick, again, it is an original wick. It's still a 0.040, but even though it's the same size jar, we're using a 1/2 inch width instead of 5/8. And again, I've tested all of these, so you should always test every candle, every change that is made in your candles. I have another video, it's all about wicking. And even though it talks mostly about cotton wicks, not wood wicks, all the concepts are still the same, and that is every change you make to any variable needs retested. Here are the 4 wicks that I'm going to use. These ones are a little bit shorter. These ones are actually cut already to the length that I need, so I'm not going to show you the little trick again. They're already cut and ready to go, so we just need to add them to the wick tabs and then get them into the jars. We're only making 3 of these, not 4. I think I mentioned that in the introduction. Let's get these wicked up real quick. Now you can wick these and insert them into each jar one at a time. You can pre-wick all your wicks and then wick all your jars. Whatever method you want to do, doesn't really matter. Everyone has their own process. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I just tend to like to do all my steps at once together when I'm doing batches. So insert all the wicks, then I add a wick sticker to all of them, and then I go and wick all the jars. I got a little piece of the wood wick there. So right in the center again. And that looks pretty good. Set that aside. Right in the center and ready to go. Okay, they're all wicked up, they're all in the pan ready to go. Let's go ahead and check the temperature of our wax. Perfect. Now I'm not making any more, so I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat. And this is going to have a little water on the bottom, so I'm just going to grab a paper towel, wipe that off so I don't get a ton of water on my scale here. Bring it over, check the temperature again. I know all of you probably already know this, and I mentioned it several times in other videos. You really got to keep a constant check on your temperature. Temperature is, I don't want to say everything in candle making, but it's very, very important. Also, these temperature guns, they really measure surface temperature. So to get an accurate reading, go ahead and stir, then take a reading. So I'm at 195 right now, just above 195. So I'm going to go ahead and add the UV inhibitor. Once again, this is not a colored wax, but for consistency, I add it to everything. Now it's a half a teaspoon per pound of UV inhibitor. I'm doing basically 2 pounds of wax, so I'm adding 1 teaspoon. These are quarter teaspoons again, so adding 4 of those. You want to add that first if you can. You want to add it when the wax is the hottest, so it will help it dissolve and break it down the easiest. Then I add liquid dye second, because again, you want dye added when the wax is hot as well. And then I tend to add my fragrance oil around the 180 mark. Sometimes a touch hotter. For paraffin, heavier paraffin waxes, I will add it hotter, 185, but the parasol is generally around 180. All right, guys, so we're at about 184 right now. I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside. Of course, got the measuring cup. Okay, now again, let me just say real quick, and again, I've mentioned this in several other videos, but I would typically use some kind of Dixie cup, paper cup, something like that, or a glass measuring, which is what I would typically use. But I don't have all that equipment up here, just kind of set up to make a series of these videos from the kitchen. So I just happen to have some of these spare cups around, so I'm just using them since I have them on hand. Generally, I would use a glass measuring device if you have one. So go ahead and get the scale ready to go. Now for this particular candle, we are using 2.3 ounces for 3 of these candles. Turn it out. There we go. I already forgot what I said, 2.3. Dead silence, awkward silence. Okay. All right, so I went just a touch over, but that's okay. Anyways, normally you want to be pretty precise, but in this case, we're pretty close. Actually, you know what? That's going to drive me nuts. So I wouldn't do that when I'm normally making candles, so I'm not going to do it now. I'm going to fix that. All right, here we go. Now, when pouring small amounts of oil like this, especially on a full bottle, some people can make a mess. It can start running down the side of the bottle or all over the counter. So check out my other videos. I talk about how to avoid that with a little trick using a toothpick or something like that. But in this case, it was fairly easy for me to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add the oil. We're at just over 180 right now. All right, so let's check the temperature of this wax. All right, so we need to get these poured. I talked too much that I let it go a little cooler than I normally do with this wax. So let's go ahead and get it poured. Normally I would pour 6006 around 170. We're just a little below that right now, 165. So we're gonna go ahead and pour these. Oh, and I forgot to add the better view. There we go. So same thing, pour them most of the way. Right up to the top of the wood wicks. It's my favorite. Almost burying the wick, just touching out maybe a tad. As you make more of these candles, you'll see how much your wax shrinks in your particular jar. It's going to vary by jar. Jars that are taller than they are wide are going to shrink more, and so you'll have to kind of get used to your own process if you're using pre-cut wood wicks to figure out how much to pour, so that you don't really have to do any trimming after they're completely cooled. So now that these are poured, just like everything else, we're going to cover these up and let them cool. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and check out the others as well. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments, and thanks for tuning in. Don't go anywhere yet. I forgot, I'm going to show you the final products here, what they look like. I was going to show you me putting on the labels, but I realized you really don't need to see me put on the labels. I've got other videos where I'm putting on labels, so I'm just going to show you what the finished product looks like with the label on, and taken with some nice product photography that I use for my website and other marketing. So I hope you enjoy this. Oh, hey, also, I had a request from my last video that showed a portion of my kitchen as well, just like this video did. A few people wanted to know what the rest of my kitchen area looked like. So I said, sure, I'll try to show a little bit more footage of that in the next video. Well, I completely forgot. So I'm just going to grab my camera and show you a little bit around the kitchen area, just because, again, a few people had asked to see it. So sure, why not? All right, so this is from kind of the entrance into the kitchen area. Again, it's a mess. We're doing a lot of work. You're gonna see paint buckets and drills and tubs and all sorts of stuff laying around. But anyways, this is what the kitchen looks like from one vantage point. So there is a firewall. Geez, I'm a nerd. Fireplace, and then of course, back behind there's a little laundry room area. So there's the bar area. We've seen me mostly working, and you see another bar area over there with the sink and everything. And then you see this in the normal footage. And then there's the back area. Now I wish it was light. You could see a lot more, but there's a lot of windows. They run the entire length to the back side of the house, including even into the living room area. Anyways, outside there is about 5 acres just straight back. And it's a great little view. There's a small deck there, but it's a great view of, if you've seen my other videos, you see the koi pond and some of the property, and then the tree line in the back, but it's dark. You can't see that. So anyways, I'm just obliging for the people that wanted to see the rest of the kitchen. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks guys. See you next time.